Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 2 of my cEDH 3-color tier list. Now, you may have noticed that I'm wearing a different outfit from part 1. I actually recorded the entire video in one go, but unfortunately, somehow half of my video became corrupted, so I am going to currently go through the cards that got corrupted in the middle there. Hopefully, I remember the exact reasons I placed them in the right orders, and we're going to break down some of these archetypes and go from there. So, Brawlin and Shabraz, this partner pair is really interesting because I feel like they get underestimated a lot. It's the fact that there's like a pretty decent Jeskai Wheels deck, and the fact that it has these one-card Curiosity combos with one of your two partner commanders is pretty interesting. It's a lot like Falco and Holland, where, you know, it's printed in the same set, gives you a lot of value right out of the command zone, has one commander that does a good amount of stuff, and has another commander that does the same thing. They're very synergistic in the way they work together. A little bit better in Falco and Holland in the way that they don't rely on one another to both be out at the same time. You can argue that Holden can be independent of Falco in a sense, but you know, they're both very integral in like helping each other out to do the same thing. So it's also really interesting because it's a commander pair that I hadn't really thought about in a very long time until Josh of Elder Drunken Highlander made a couple really deep runs with this deck, making the top cut of Oktoberfest, as well as making a deep run in a smaller cEDH tournament that was called the Eminence Invitational. Two deep runs with the deck. It's also hard to say because, you know, there were multiple times on camera with that archetype that, due to the unfamiliarity with it, that people were sort of throwing the game to Josh in, from what I saw, which was a little tough because to evaluate an archetype correctly, you kind of want to assume people are playing against it with a knowledge base. But also it being a fringe underdog is something worth noting. So it's actually pretty decent. As I mentioned, having like the Niv Mizzet thing on top of the fact that you get another color, you get access to breach piles, you get into access to intuition plus breach, and you get all these like really unique will payoffs, and it's obviously a lot easier to cast than something like Niv Mizzet. It makes this archetype pretty interesting, so I think I'm gonna put it up here in near the B rank. I think it's comparable to Elsha, but as I said, the one card combos make it a little bit better than Elsha, and the fact that Elsha really struggles to win a lot of games, and the fact like when you're not doing top combos or breach combos, so we're gonna keep it up in this higher B tier area. Next up is what I think is one of the most underrated commanders in the entire format. We're talking about Tayam, Luminous, Enigma. And the thing with Tayam is that Tayam, with the pilots who are really good with Tayam, is terrifying. Because of how resilient Tayam is, it's just like recurring like stacks pieces over and over again and making them really hard to remove. It just like doing that with while able to like break parity on rule of law effects, and it has like a lot of unique counter synergies, and there's just a way that like really confident Tayam pilots can really abuse this card. The problem is that it's really difficult. I think Tayam is not an easy deck to learn at all, and it's probably one of the best stacks decks of the format, but because it's so difficult to learn and like aggressively complicated, you really have to dedicate your time to learning this deck. But when you do learn it, every time I play against it, I just feel like the deck is a really big menace. So I highly encourage like any stacks players who haven't really gotten a chance to check this archetype out, really take a look at Tayam, because I do think it's a really strong card. It just really needs the right pilot to be able to master it. But when people are good at this deck, they are very good at this deck. For that, I'm going to put it up here in the B tier. Once again, super complicated, but I think like a really good pilot could make easy deep runs with this deck. All right, we are still talking about partner pairs from the Ikoria commander deck. Let's talk about Azura Nukema. Now, I remember when this archetype came out, we were talking about how many different ways you could layer win conditions with this deck. It's an infinite food chain outlet. It was also an Allurin combo outlet, which is the like cleanest Allurin combo we've ever had, despite Allurin not really being that great. Holland's another good argument for Allurin combos. Flash was still legal at the time, so we were like, you can play Flash in this deck too, and like it was really funny like having these discussions. But Azura Nukema was really popular when it first came out, and now it's sort of not nearly as popular. I still think the archetype is very good. It's very quick. It made it once again another deep run at Oktoberfest. I was one of the original primer authors for the collaborative Ukema primer. I had my own independent list at the time, which was the Hermit Druid variant, and that was the deck that I was piloting. One of the first gameplay videos on this channel is actually the Azura Nukema turn 2 win with Hermit Druid, which is a pretty cool win to have featured there. And I'll leave a card for that up here. But it was a really cool deck, and I still think it has a lot of potential. I think it's probably really really slept on at this point in its career as an archetype, and I would not be surprised to find out that a good pilot was able to bring this deck to a top finish. I think it's just food chain's in a really awkward place right now, and a lot of people have sort of written the archetype off, but I really don't hate the idea that someone can make a really deep run with this commander. So for that, I think it's up towards the top of the B tier, with being very arguable in taking Muldrotha's space. Just a very close conversation for the two of them for sure. Just because food chain, as I mentioned, is an awkward place. I think Muldrotha pulls it out, but it's a very close conversation between these archetypes. Okay, so Calamax. Calamax is a weirdie because Calamax has like basically one card win conditions with Court of Calling, but that's really all Calamax does great. It can also do cute stuff like copy your Nexus of Fate for 2 extra turns. It's extremely commander dependent. The commander really gives you no card advantage apart from doubling your spells, so it's a really interesting gimmicky deck. You need your commander on the battlefield. It needs to be tapped for it to actually do anything, so you give your opponents a lot of warning when this is happening, and you know, for the ability to be able to like play Calamax and hold up the cord, you're talking about something like 10 mana, so it's not like it really feels like it has haste when it comes out. But Calamax is obviously a strong card. It's just, to me, a little bit of a gimmicky commander. It super loses to Drannith Magistrate. And it's kind of a weird place to be like a teamer deck that doesn't really care about creatures, except for if the creatures are for infinite combos with Kiki Jiki and stuff like that. So it's a weird deck, and I think it finds itself in a pretty weird place in the format. I think it's good. I wouldn't be surprised if someone came in and took some wins with it. Also, Spleenface is really the only person I ever see playing this archetype anyways. But Calamax has never really impressed me, but that doesn't mean it's not a viable deck, which is why I'm going to drop it around here in the C tier. Probably worse than Kalia. I don't know, maybe Plasm again. We're throwing to the bottom of that, but we'll see. All right, another Grix option. We got Zevolor here. Zevolor is a really interesting one. It's very gimmicky, right? So it does its thing, which is if a spell targets, it triples those targeting. I actually have seen this commander take down a couple local events near me, which is funny because that's the only time I've ever really seen it see play. But the ability to have like a triple intuition or specifically triple Jeska's will and stuff like that is kind of interesting. To be able to like triple Thoughtseize your opponents the turn before you're about to combo off. So there's a lot of like really cute gimmicky stuff that the deck does. And apart from that, it is a Grixis commander. As I said, no card advantage in the command zone, but it also turns certain card advantage options that target your opponents into cards that are very real, right? So with that, Zevolor is not as strong as these Grixis options up here because it's a little more gimmicky than those, but I still think it has like a high B tier placement. Probably not as clean as Yanet. I feel like Yanet has a pretty clean game plan, but definitely in this Brawlin Shabraz kind of areas is where I think you put it. Dravy. So Dravy is really interesting. It's a commander that even between this recording and the one that I just did, so before the recording that you're going to see for the rest of this episode, Dravy had not put up a top result in a really long time, but literally last weekend it put up a top result, which is awkward because now I'm recording this video with that knowledge. So at the end of this episode, you're going to see Dravy in probably a lower placement than I have it right now. But the printing of Preston apparently did a lot of really, really good stuff for this deck. So with that in mind, it's interesting to think about Dravy's placement in the format. For those who don't know, it can combo off with Emil and Guida's Cradle, where you're basically getting the ability to tap down your opponents at instant speed and then create infinite mana for yourself, which is obviously very strong. And then the winning the game has always been like the struggle for Dravy, but I know there are certain pod lists that allow you to go up to the Cradle line, and I know there are now lines with Preston that supposedly make it a lot easier to win the game. I don't have those memorized, but as I said, at the end of this video, you're going to see it in a different place. But I think Dravy is probably good enough to be in this, like, probably better than top of C tier, but like bottom of B tier. You know, it's a powerful enough card, right? Like, it's always been fundamentally broken, but winning the game has been a problem. But as I said, with the new addition of Preston to the archetype, I think it actually has a chance to be something more than it has been historically. Obeka's really cool because it allows you to basically shut off effects that would kill you at the end of the turn, or any effects that like make things not permanent. Obeka's super gimmicky. I don't want to play a commander. If I cast a Final Fortune and then have my commander bounced, I don't want to just lose to my own gimmick for my own deck. That's where I am personally. I think the commander's kind of neat. It's kind of interesting, but I don't know why you would really play Obeka over any other Grixis options, especially when a lot of them are playing cards like Last Chance, Warrior's Oath, and Final Fortune already. So if those cards are already being played without needing to like really overcommit to the gimmick of this card, then for me, it just is a very good archetype that I'm very suspicious of. You know, it's got Grixis stuff, as I said, so like it's probably the best thing that's going to be in this category, but I don't know why you would play this over Grixis options. And I get that it's cute, but it's cute in a way that like really opens you up to just losing the game for almost no value. Hana is one of these commanders that I wish we just had more time with. I think I've talked about it at a previous point, but with the printing of Dominaria United and the sets that have followed that, like there was almost no time to like breathe between these sets. The things with like, same thing with like 40k and stuff like that. So the ability to really be able to focus on some of these Dominaria United commanders hasn't really gotten there. I know Dihana has been explored as a card in the 99. I'm seeing it a lot in the CEDH decks, which is kind of cool. I think it's got a really interesting potential for like Reanimator style decks. I think it has a lot of interesting potential in these like weird mid-range ad nauseum decks, but it's also competing in the space with Timna Jeska and Timna Rograk, which is like a very competitive space to exist in. And I just don't think enough work has been done with this commander yet to really prove what it has the ability to do. But I think it has a lot of strong things written on it, especially its minus ability. So with that in mind, I'm really tempted to put it in this B tier, probably around the Aminatu space. Aminatu is a little cleaner, maybe even worse than Marath, but about right here, I would think. Atla Palani. This is a definitive archetype that I am so suspicious of. It even has an infinite recursion loop that's non-deterministic, making me so suspicious. It is the definition of a deck that is, it does a thing and it can play some stacks pieces, but like trying to describe how you actually win the game with this deck is always so strange to me. I mean, you play your mirror entity and then you turn everything into 0, and then like somehow there are loops with that and they're all eggs and it's a whole thing. I think it's performed better than either of, I would have to assume Obeka would at least perform higher better than this one, but like, yeah, it'll go here. Not excited to talk about it. It's just a weird deck. Zaksara. Zaksara is really cool. It's a Sultai option, gives you like access to basically freed from the real combos in the command zone, where all you have to do is get your Penman's Aura or you're freed from the real. And then suddenly Zaksara is making you infinite mana, and then all you need is an outlet. So something like a Walking Ballista or a Hydroid Krasis, stuff like that. And it also does like some cute stuff with X spells, where it's like if you get stuck in like a stacks matchup, it'll help you there. But it's just like one of the worst Sultai options that's available. It was a list on the DDB for a while. It does a thing. It's in good colors, right? So like, you know, can win the game better than Dravy, which is kind of the common theme of today. Pretty medium. The new Hazezon. So this is one of the new Dominaria legends that isn't in the main set, but it was in like boosters and like weird alt frames and stuff, whatever. The point is, this recently made a deep run, ending in 9th place during the Swiss at Oktoberfest by a well-known figure in the community named Why Not. This list is super cool. I was shown it day 1 and didn't even realize they were doing well with it until like halfway through day 2, and I was like, oh my god, you're like a couple places behind me in the standings with this very strange deck, and it plays like all the deserts you can play and like whack stacks effects and land destruction, and it like just kind of crater hoofs for a win, or like Alish Norns or something like that. Like it's weird, but it's super cool, and it's just a very stacks heavy deck that, you know, just uses the fact that Hazezon is like a desert crucible of worlds that also generates you bodies when you do that to win the game. I can try and find that list again. It is super, I can't even remember the last place I saw it. I'll have to like dive deep in the internet to find out how to find that list again, but it was super cool. It's one of those commanders that I was like, I think this is a cEDH viable commander, but I don't have the time to build it. And then I saw Why Not show up with this deck, and I was like, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening. Like, I'm so happy. And then it made a deep run into Oko, and I'm just kind of like, I don't even know what to say. That's so cool to me. But yeah, Hazezon is super weird. I think it's just so underexplored that I don't know how to describe it right now. But given that, man, it's so hard to say, because like, it seems like it was built in a really interesting, unique way. It probably got some wins because of the fact that people didn't know what the hell was happening. But like, I'm willing to put it at the bottom of C tier, and you know, just hope that enough people keep iterating on this where I don't feel bad about putting it in like B tier or something. That'd be super cool. It's a weird deck, and it's hard to explain for right now, and it's hard to like have a real answer for, right? Because a list did a deep run, but in a major tournament, like Oktoberfest is one of the larger tournaments we've had, and it made a really deep run there. So I don't know, maybe Hazezon is a new up and comer in the format. We'll see. Holland is a deck I respect the crap out of. I played enough against Just Ice or Spleen Face playing this deck. The deck is just so solid at doing what it's doing. It's a really unique cEDH deck because it's like this weird creature tempo combo stacks deck, and it's really like cool to play against, which is kind of weird because like in casual it's like such a lame commander there, but because it encourages you to play cards like Grand Arbiter and things like Collector Oof, and also have these like Shrieking Drake combos that you can find off your Ranger Captain of EOS. I'm a big fan of Holland. I think it's a really solid deck. I think it's a deck people sleep on all the time. Just Ice continually like brings it to tournaments and does pretty decently with it, if not like well. Yeah, I just have a lot of respect for this deck. That's really it. It's an archetype I respect. I think I like it here in like this range. Definitely more consistent than Send Triplets. I don't want to put it above Tayam, but I don't want to put many things above Tayam. And I think I'll put it around here, but like definitely solid B tier contender. Very happy that this deck exists. It provides something really unique to the format, and yeah. Corvold. Corvold is a deck that I respect the crap out of too. It's also weird because obviously this is another Braden special. We're talking about a lot of Braden with these 3-color options today. It's another one like Anala where I try to play it and I'm like, how does anyone achieve anything playing this deck? But every time I play against it, my opponents are like, oh, here's a ridiculous hand out of this deck and I'm going to explode and constantly present threats over and over and over again. But I also have played many games with it where it's either A, doing that, like being the threat at the table, if you give it like an inch, but if you respect it, it's not good. Like if you respect Corvold at all, it's super easy to mess with. And that's kind of the weird balance though. But it's also tough because like you're not always going to be in mid-range pods, right? You're not always going to be answering the Corvold over and over again. And then it's going to start like sacking treasures and gaining advantage and drawing cards off of it. And then you start to like lose this steamroll that Corvold gets to run away with. It's definitely a B tier commander. It's got to be high up here, right? Like it is very solid. I would feel pretty confident saying it is one of the best B tier commanders, if not the best B tier commander that I have right here, because that feels like a perfect description of Corvold. Like if you give it an inch, it'll take a mile, but if you don't give it an inch, then it's not like a bunch of these other decks up here that have ways of scrapping back. And it's not like a Nala where like you give it an inch and it explodes and you definitely get there, whereas Corvold can still fizzle. I feel really solid about top of B tier for Corvold. It's a very good deck in general. I think it's a good deck. Okay, so Vadrik, or is this Vadrock? Vadrock is a deck that we're seeing play at some points. Basically what happens is like you can use this as its own Lore Drakus in the command zone where you like infinitely get a Dockside and a bounce spell. You draw your whole deck because it's a bounce spell like into the Royal or something like that, or Geist Wave. It was always an archetype I was very suspicious of. It was on the DDB for a little bit, but like it has Breach, it has Dockside combos. It's a cool card. Like I like it as a card. I think it's very easily disruptive. You play a Rest in Peace and this deck is literally dead. So Yorn. DJ Yavimaya is a local to me. They're someone who lives in Massachusetts, and so I play against them every once in a while, and I was a big fan of Yorn when it first came out, and I really, really wanted Yorn to be good. And I think it still has a lot of potential, but no matter how much DJ plays this deck, or I've seen them play this deck, it feels like it's always doing a thing, and it's got the stasis lock, and it's starting to lock people out of the game, and then someone else squeaks out the win. And it sucks because I want a cool stasis deck in the format. I mean, it is a cool stasis deck in the format, right? But I want it to be able to do well too. And I think Yorn is just like, it does the thing. It doubles your mana, or it is a cool A+B with stasis-like effects and Root Maze and things like that. But it really only wins with console. Like, I'm definitely interested to see people explore Yorn a little more. Like, I like the idea of putting cards like Thrasios in the 99 so that when you're untapping, you can activate your Thrasioses and stuff like that. So it's not just all relying on the fact that Yorn has like 0 card advantage. I think it's just like a solid C tier commander. I think it suffers the Dravy problem a little bit, where it has such trouble winning the game. I don't like that this is like the Sultai corner over here. The same thing here, right? Like they're just like these very consistent, powerful decks that just have such trouble actually turning the corner, which is so tough because they're such cool decks. And Offensa, this deck was a deck more so when Flash Hulk was around because it was Flash Hulk hate in the command zone. It's kind of just worse than Blood Pod in every way nowadays. I would rather play it than a Carador, but it's gonna go in like if you're into like a specific Reanimator or Flash Hulk meta, like sure, maybe bring out an Offensa, but it's a heavy fringe deck. It's one of my favorite cards of all time. Narset Enlightened Master. I've never played it in cEDH. No, that's actually not true. I borrowed someone's deck at one point. I don't know if it was what I would consider optimized, but I did borrow a Narset cEDH deck. I was super happy when I think it was Jamaican Dude and Ukon were playing these at it like top 16 to chaos event, I think, which was awesome because I was like, oh no, this deck is dead and I haven't seen it in years. And then at top 16 that event, it does the thing, right? It does the one kind of gimmicky thing. Narset's really hard to interact with, and if you get to attack with it, you almost always win the game, but you have to build your deck so that it's almost all fast mana and extra turn spells, and the balance of those things can really screw you over sometimes if you have a bad flip off of Narset. But it's a deck I love it so much. I think Narset's so cool. I love Jeskai decks. I think that if people keep working on it, I think it has a lot of potential, but it's definitely one of those, like, it's clunky. It is clunky. It loses to Drannith Magistrate straight up. It gets hit hard by tax effects, but I like it in this like lower C range where it's like, this is a deck that someone can show up with and steal wins from you because people are not packing the appropriate type of interaction, and they can't interact with this hexproof creature, and they don't wipe the board, and they lose the game. And because it has the ability to win the game, I'm going to put it over like the Yorn Dravy area. I really like Narset like right here, but it's a lower C tier option for sure, despite my deep affection for the card. Oh, this list is getting so big. cEDH Brood Tyrant. This is a Sultai option that Turbo cEDH was kind of like a thing, right? Where it would just, you had Food Chain wins, you had Hermit Druid wins, you had Ad Nauseam wins, you had just, it was like layered combo on top of layered combo. It's a super cool deck. It's a Sultai deck. It's very good at just like trying to win the game very quickly and do its thing. And I think it's a lot cleaner than a lot of these B tier options, right? I think it's like around here with like the Holland and the Tyam and the Paco and Halden, like these decks that like do a lot of cool stuff. Like cEDH doesn't do anything in the command zone per se, but it enables a lot of stuff from the command zone. You lose to like a Drannith Magistrate and stuff like that, but that's a lot of decks here, right? So I kind of like it. Yeah, I think like around here. It's like a solid B tier option. Sultai is still a good color combination despite my hesitations that I mentioned with it, right? So happy to include it still. All right, let's talk about one of my favorite cards of all time that I've literally never played in cEDH, and I really want to. It's Kaikar the Windsfury, and it's such a cool card. Every time you cast a non-creature, you get mana battery. That's also a spirit. It used to be a Divergent Transformation deck, and a lot of different stuff. It's been a Storm deck historically, and it just kind of like disappeared off the face of the earth because it wasn't like new and sexy anymore. This might be another one that I'm kind of into reinvigorating. I kind of miss Kaikar a lot. I think it was a really cool deck. I know Spleenface was playing it for a long time. I know there was a database list, as I mentioned, for a long time. I like Kaikar a lot. I kind of miss Kaikar, and I kind of want to play around with it because it's one of my favorite card designs of all time, just period. And I think it's so perfect as a Jeskai card. I remember literally like pre-ordering a foil as soon as it came out, which is not something I used to do back in the day. I just adored this card so much back when I was only playing casual. And then like it has just a lot of explosive potential. So it's hard to say though, because like a little clunky at winning the game. It does open up some breach combos with cards like Burning Inquiry because of the fact that it like Kaikar triggers and gives you the mana every time. So with all of that being said, I kind of like it in this like high C tier range, and you know, maybe with a little more exploration, people playing around with it a little more, it can go back to being like a good deck. Arak. When I was first playing cEDH, this was kind of a thing. There was like I think it was a Cobblepot special, just like play Arak and a bunch of stacks effects that like make your opponents bounce their lands to their hands and weird like that. I don't know. It's a weird deck. And I never really like got it. I just think it's like a good archetype that I'm pretty sus on. Yeah, it's like a cute thing. I just don't think it's actually like anything I would be happy about sleeving up and bringing to a table ever. It seems really weird. Like as I mentioned, a lot of the effects were really strange about like bouncing lands and all of that getting like triggered and doubled and whatnot. Not biased whatsoever. We're talking about Tivit. Those who don't know, as I mentioned, my only tournament win for a single tournament was Mox Masters 1, where I won with Tivit. Went completely undefeated in the Swiss with this. The deck performed extremely well for me. I have played it since then. There's definitely certain metas that are a little annoying to play it in, like all turbo metas, but even then, I'm still so confident when I pick this deck up. It rewards good mid-range play so effectively. It's very, very solid. It's a deck I feel extremely confident playing. Occasionally, you have to mulligan really low with it just because you need certain answers for this format, right? And Tivit is just like has a hefty cost to it itself. It does feed Docksides, but I usually don't actually have to worry about that as a problem because you run enough interaction to stop what they play after the Docksides and, you know, actually have answers for Dockside and things like that. Then having the one card win condition in the command zone is huge. I'm just very, very high on this deck. It's very hard not to be. It just feels so good when I pilot it. I really, really like Tivit, and it's really hard for me not to love it a lot. It's also top 16 multiple times in other pilots' hands. There are many, many pilots who have played this deck that are not me who have also done well with it. And even some players who are like pretty new to the format, like picking this deck up and doing really well with it. So no hesitation. I think it's more consistent than Anala, if I'm being honest. I think it's the best commander we've talked about so far. It feels pretty safe to say that. I think Inala and Tivit are a very respectable argument. I think that there is easily an argument for switching one of these two up, but I think these are both super defendable choices, and I think it's pretty crazy how good both of these options are, and like their pivot plans and stuff like that. So Tivit's just so solid. I'm really happy with it, and for everyone who's here, I'm going to acknowledge my bias, and I'm going to still put Tivit higher because of the fact that more people have had better results with it. And, you know, you can feel free to tell me I'm wrong in the comments for that. You know, if there's any decks here that you think are technically better than Tivit at this point, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. But I really think this deck is so good. I do. I think it's so good. I think Tivit provides you a lot, and there's so many benefits of playing an Esper Shell with a 1-card combo with your commander, with the ability to have card advantage in the command zone. Just like so many good things come from this deck, and I'm a big fan of Tivit. Kess is so tough because I feel like people play Kess strangely, and it's still one of the best decks in the format because it's a solid Grixis deck that allows 1-card win conditions with intuition, and it allows you to replay out of your graveyard, which you want to be doing in Grixis anyways. I've seen many players do very well with this deck. There's this weird like idea that this is like a dead archetype when Kess is still like very clearly one of the best decks. It's not sexy anymore, right? Like people don't want to play Kess because it's been the same old, it's the Zur thing, right? Like it's the same old boring crap people have been staring at for years, right? So no one's excited about playing Kess again unless you're a devoted Kess pilot. So people don't pick up Kess, but that doesn't mean Kess isn't good. It just means Kess is kind of boring and unattractive, right? And that doesn't mean that's still not one of the best decks in 3 colors. So I think it's more consistent than Zur. I think Inala's upward potential is higher than Kess. Kess's mid-game potential is higher than Inala's, but because of the new rule of law proof combos in Inala, I think Inala may just squeak out this little upward movement. But as I mentioned, like this whole section here is just all such good decks. Like it is, I mean, it's the A tier for a reason. Minsk being under these two is actually a crime. I don't know what I'm saying. This deck is better. It's so good. You play a Rector and you win the game. I don't know why that was so low for this entire time, but no, that's criminal. Yeah, this feels so much better. Hinata, this was a deck some people, and myself included, were really excited about when it was first printed, and then people just kind of gave up on it. Yeah, it was Neon Dynasty. I feel like this card was so hyped, and people were playing it because like intuition cost 2 mana with it. Your cards like March of Swirling Mist automatically targeted all your opponent's stuff for a single mana, and there was like a bunch of really cool broken cards like Aurelia's Fury. I think like the lack of card advantage in the command zone is definitely like a thing. I think the biggest deterrent from what I understood for this card was basically the fact that it was very, very commander reliant. So if you didn't have Hinata, the deck didn't do anything because you had a bunch of like really clunky X spells in your hand. And then, you know, it's still got the Jeskai problem of like, it's kind of hard to actually like win the game. But the stuff that it did do, it did exceptionally well. Like it made some really broken stuff happen. So it reminds me of Magus Lucia Kane a lot in that sense, where it's like it enables these cards to just kind of be cracked. So I kind of like it here-ish, like around this area. New commander deck Mishra. It has a bunch of weird combos in it. It's a Grixis Shell. It allows you to basically make a 4/4 war form copy of one of your non-creature artifacts of return. There's cards like Gonti's Aether Heart and like things like that that allow you to like take infinite turns with it, as well as, you know, having access to the entire Grixis space as well. You can also play like a weird Grixis Stacks artifact deck with it. I think it's another case of like Brothers War, like in the long term, like just came out. It is still so recent. So I don't think people have explored with this card enough, but there are combos with it, and I think it's another deck that if someone puts some work into this one, I think it actually has a lot of upward potential. That being said, I'm going to keep it over here with like the Mimeoplasm conversation of like, it may have a lot of upward potential, but I haven't seen anything with it, and people haven't explored it enough, and despite being in kind of insanely good colors and having a lot of upward potential, it's going to be here because I can't really say what it's going to do yet. Carmella got really good when Saw in Half was printed. It's got like an Anala long long combo that it uses, because you saw in half and then you get back your stuff, and then someone asked me to explain it the other day, and I was like, I literally don't think I can. But it's some wacky combos. It does the Spellseeker thing. So it's like, instead of Spellseeker with an all in the command zone, you have your Carmella out and you saw in half it, and it does cool stuff. Or I think it's Carmella plus Demonic Tutor wins the game, I think, because you Carmella Demonic Tutor get saw in half, and that's how you actually win. But it's a whole thing, and I gun to my head cannot explain it to you. But Grix's deck has mana acceleration attached to the creature and haste, so it does its thing right away. It enables unique combos on top of the broken Grixis stuff that already exists, like Underworld Breach and Thassa's Oracle and Ad Nauseam and all of these things. So it does all these things, and also just has its own unique combo with a very decent card, right? Like, you can saw in half your Spellseekers, you can saw in half your Dockside. Like, you don't have to rely on doing that with the commander. So yeah, respect for Carmella. I think it's still, I haven't seen it at tables as much, but I know it is a deck people are playing, and I think it's like, it's as good as Kess in the sense of like having the ability to recur stuff. It might be a little better than Jaleva. It might be around like the Abaddon range, maybe a little better. I kind of like it here. Is good in Grixis, gives you recursion, has a useful ability on top of all of that. Like, it's really hard to argue with it. Speaking of basically that exact same argument, we're going to talk about Evelyn. So some people are playing Evelyn with World Gorger Dragon. It's not really that hard of an argument to say it's the best World Gorger Dragon outlet ever. It's in Grixis. It's super easy to cast with things like Jewel Lotus and Dark Ritual and Cabal Ritual because of the flexible hybrid mana cost. I have a personal version of this list that I play every once in a while. You can actually see me playing it on Mental Misplays stream literally yesterday as of time of recording, which is it was Friday 1/6/23. It's a deck I enjoy playing. Oh, it's also the deck I famously played on Untitled, where I was wheeled out of lands except for my Jewel Lotus. Oh, cool, no land. It really suffers against Drannith Magistrate, but if you can dodge Drannith, the deck is really cool, because Evelyn continually gets you card advantage, or at least gets you 4 cards, and then like there are ways like Twin Flame and Saw in Half and bounce effects and Phantasmal Image and playing other vampires that also do other things, so that Evelyn is like triggering consistently. And when you can trigger Evelyn multiple times, it's really good. Like, for example, with Saw in Half, if you saw in half your Evelyn, you get 4 cards from each player, and you are limited to playing only one of them per turn, right? So it is a real limitation. But the fact that it has flash, it's in a very strong colors, very hard to argue it's not. Once again, it has that limitation of doesn't really do great against a Drannith Magistrate, but it does a lot of things really well, and it's the best World Gorger outlet we have. But you don't even need to play that. It's also an infinite Dockside outlet, because you can just exile all of your opponent's decks and your own deck, and then just play your Thassa's Oracle from exile. It's very, very solid. Yeah, I have nothing but respect for this deck. As I mentioned, like, it really does suffer against like Drannith, or like having Evelyn removed, because Evelyn's not perfect. It has clunky options on it too, like the fact, once again, you can only play 1 spell from her per turn, or even play a land too, right? But it is a very good card, and I think it definitely deserves to be just a little better than Carmella. I think it's more consistent than Marnius. Zur is a real conversation, but I think it might be better than Zur even. So I think this feels like a really solid place for it. And Evelyn also has a number of top 16s to its name. This is Falco Sparrow, the definition of an archetype people play that I am suspicious of. I do not get this deck. Not that I don't understand the basic concept of it, but like, why would you want to play an Elsha deck that is in more awkward colors, has a greater requirement for things being cast off the top of your library? Like, if your Bant deck is winning through Sensei's top combos, there's something going on here that's not really just like making a lot of sense. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of this Falco Sparrow list. I really don't feel like I respect it a lot at the table. I don't think it does a whole lot. It's kind of one of those decks that I'm like relieved to sit down against, because I know they might interact with my opponents, and then I kind of don't worry about them winning efficiently. Yeah, it's just it is a deck I'm pretty suspicious of. I think it's better than something as clunky as like Rune, and can win the game better than something like the Windgrace, but maybe not even Vadrock, which is really saying something. Okay, my love, Cat Daddy, Jetmir, Nexus of Revels. Love this card. I adore this card. It's so good. It's a Craterhoof Behemoth in the command zone. It makes people sweat profusely. It's one of the best win conless stacks commanders ever printed. It definitely has its limitations, right? Like, it doesn't have card advantage in the command zone. It does certain things, but I think if there was ever going to be a win conless stacks deck that is cEDH viable, it is this one. I think I'm very happy with where the deck is right now. It keeps performing pretty decently. I've even taken it into like really toxic metas and done pretty okay with it. Let's just like 3 turbo pods and like played Jetmir and still felt pretty fine when playing this deck, which is really saying something because it is not a deck that like you would think does well in a triple turbo pod. But yeah, I am really high on Jetmir, and I don't really care if it seems like I'm biased on this card. I think it's very strong, and I think the way it breaks parity on certain sax pieces while also just like keeping your opponents at bay and consistently surprising me with how well it does. Like I really underestimated it when I built it, and then it just like it keeps doing well, and people keep just like not being able to answer the right things at the right times. Does that mean it's an A tier commander? No, I don't think so. As much as I would love to say it is, a part of me really wants to, but I kind of want to put it up in this like B tier range. And also, once again, I'm totally admitting that I'm biased here, but like I think it's up here in this top of B tier. Coralville is really close to. I think I'll out of respect for Coralville, I'll put it like right behind it. But I think it's really good. I really do like Jetmir a lot. I think it's a very solid deck. Rafin is a tough deck because I think people build it wrong a lot. Unfortunately, it is a deck that is very easy to just like read the line of text and be like, okay, I'm gonna put in cards that work very synergistically with this card, and that's not always the angle you really want to focus on. With all that being said, Rafin is very efficiently costed. It has a very solid body as a 1/4 flyer that continually grows bigger due to the connives. A big trap with this card is people keep like thinking for some reason it provides card advantage when it provides card selection. If you're really abusing the graveyard, then yes, it is like almost card advantage in that sense, but you also still need your card advantage engines or Rafin doesn't do jack. It's also a doomsday pile cracker. It's a really cool card. I think Rafin is very strong. There are arguments that it is one of the best Azura options. People were saying it was the best Esper commander ever printed, and I think that's just incorrect, especially when compared to like Tivit and Zur and Marnius. I think it's really good though. As I mentioned, it is like the cost is a little wonky because it is just 3 color pips, but all of that being said, I think this card is really good. I don't know that people have built it perfectly so far, but I'm very confident placing it in the A tier, probably over Abaddon, close to this like Carmella, Marnius range. Like I haven't seen enough Carmella to know confidently, but I know that there are enough things that make Rafin clunky-er that I'm happy to put this here. Okay, Rigo. This is an archetype people play that I'm suspicious of because people are like, oh, it's like Bant Timna. And I'm like, why aren't you playing Timna? And I know it's stupid, but like it's a perfect imitation of Timna, but like kind of a lot worse in a lot of ways and doesn't really provide you a win condition. And it kind of could be like Bant Edric, I guess, but it's also Timna. So it doesn't like trigger multiple times off each player. And I don't know, like why would you want a worse Timna that doesn't provide you any upside apart from it getting a shield counter? And like the fact that it limits the size of your creatures, like I never understood why people got so excited about this card. So it's going right here in archetypes I'm pretty suspicious of, and I think Vadrock wins the game better. So no, I don't want to do Falco like that. I might like this less than Lord Windgrace, which is really saying something. Speaking of insane Naya commanders, let's talk about Rocco. Rocco is so good. Like it is a really good deck. I was gonna be explaining how Minsk is like insane for a Naya deck, but then there's also this other insane Naya deck in Rocco, and it has these layered win conditions. It wins the game by just sneezing in the right direction, and you combo off with Rocco, and it's versatile because it's toolbox in the command zone. It feels like everything Yisan wants to be at times, and obviously like they're very different commanders, but Rocco just combos so easily and it wins the game so easily. And this deck has a ton of top 16 performances through a number of different pilots. I just think it's really good. The clunkiness with certain win conditions makes it so that I'm not just like snap putting it by Minsk, Beloved Ranger, but it does a lot of really good stuff, and it's very strong. Honestly, it just, and it keeps consistently putting up results. So I have no hesitation that it is one of these A tier commanders, and whether it's like probably worse than Minsk and Boo, is it better than Evelyn? I don't know. Evelyn's pretty solid. Is it better than Zur? I don't know. Like, but I think it's probably better than Marnius. Like, and Zur hasn't put up result in a long time. Evelyn's only put up 1 or 2 results. So like, I think these 2 Naya decks are just the exception of this color combination so intricately. Like they represent this color combo so well. Spoilers, I'm gonna pull down from the S tier because I don't think any are making S tier. Toulouse is a cute deck. It's an Esper deck. It's like probably the best Shadow Bag deck ever printed, which is, I don't know if that means anything, because Shadow Bag is like a really cute archetype, but it's not like an A tier archetype by any means. It's an Esper though, and it cracks Doomsday Piles. Not great, but it does. The deck's really cute, and I think it does a solid thing pretty decently. I think it's very clearly like a B tier commander, but one that I would not play over something like I think I respect Aminatu to say it's better than Toulouse. So something like around here. Hey, it's Sinestra. Let's talk about Tasigur, because I've seen you play it, and it makes me pretty no. There's a time a long time ago where I would have put Tasigur in like a low C tier, honestly. That's not the case anymore. I think a lot of the fact that like Hullbreaker Horror exists, and a lot of these 7-drops that just kind of appeared out of nowhere that made Neoform Tasigur strategies actually super viable, makes it go from this deck being kind of like a mid C, well, no, I didn't even say C. That feels very rude, to what has been historically like a decent deck. It's always been tough because like the argument has been like, why aren't you just playing Tymna Thrasios? Because Tasigur is like a worse Thrasios in a lot of ways. But these Neoform strategies have made that more of a conversation, because the answer is Neoform and Eldritch Evolution. Go get these really, really strong broken cards like Razaketh and Hullbreaker Horror and like all of these cards that exist in this strategy. And so it makes Tasigur like way, way better because it has these really solid payoffs. And obviously you're still playing Sultai, you're playing good mana engines. You do not want to play your Collector Roof in this deck, right? Because you're trying to combo off with Hullbreaker Horrors and Isochron Scepters and things like that. It does a really good imitation of Thrasios, and Thrasios is a damn good card. So it's not hard for me to want to put it like at the higher end of B tier around these guys, or like low, maybe better than Jaleva and Abaddon, but like Tasigur is a solid card, and despite it being clunky and having its weaknesses and definitely like not being a perfect card by any means, I think it does enough things, and the ability for Delve to like really negate that extra mana cost on your commander, despite me often overlooking it at the table as a threat, it doesn't mean that that's correct to do so. You still can play your Seedborn Muse, you can play your Hullbreaker Horror, you can, and some people are doing all of those things and also playing Ad Nauseam, which is kind of buck wild to me. But yeah, it's really hard to argue that like Tasigur is not a strong deck, because it is. It is super solid, and it's repeatable card advantage in the command zone, despite having inherent flaws, right? Like being very badly hit by Graveyard Hate and things like that. I still think it's a very, very solid deck, and there are arguments, I think, that, first of all, I think Jaleva is better than Abaddon. I think maybe that helps with a lot of these discussions, but there's arguments where like maybe Jaleva is better than Tasigur because Grixis or like stuff like that. But I think Tasigur deserves to be at the bottom end of A tier, because I think it is, despite historically me not respecting the deck a lot, I think it is just solid enough where it deserves that respect. Wow, so we are deep into this video, but I just want to say thank you all. Genuinely, it makes me so happy to be able to make these videos, and I really hope you all enjoy them. Don't know if I thought we would get through the 3-color decks without hitting something in S tier, but I feel very confident with that decision. I also feel very confident that a lot of these high A's someday with a couple extra pieces could easily be S tier commanders. They're all really, really strong and very, very strong archetypes, and I think that just shows the demand that I expect from an S tier commander, because for me S tier is like just a cut above the rest. With all that being said, I think this 3-tier commander list is really fun to do, and I'm really enjoying going through this series and breaking down all of these for you guys. Make sure, please, if you have opinions on any of these decks, or if you think I missed any of these 3-color decks that are actually cEDH viable, please let me know it down in the comments below, because I first of all, I love finding out that people are working on decks that I've never heard of before, or like that I've never seen out in the wild. If you have any opinions on where I place these cards, which I know so many of you will, please make sure to leave them down in the comments below, because I love the conversations, I love the engagement, and it's a huge help to the channel. Also hit like and subscribe, because they help out the channel more than you can ever describe, and they're free. And if you're feeling extra generous, please check out patreon.com/comedianmtg, where, as I mentioned, we have so many benefits, including your name in the show notes at the end of the show, and benefits that are brand new, like cEDH monthly coaching sessions with yours truly, being able to vote on our poll for what's going to be a live brew every single month, and being the people who I go to whenever I just have questions about things for the channel. My patrons are always the first people I go to, and there's also a private patron chat in the Discord, so that's pretty cool too. But if you're interested, check out patreon.com/comedianmtg. For everyone who's here, thank you so much for supporting this channel. I love doing this, and I want to keep doing it more and more often. So thank you all. Hope you have an amazing week. I'll catch you next time. Peace.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing.